Welcome back to the Webster Tarpley program here on Unbound Radio. Now, I've been doing a lot of organizing work for the Warren Bill, and the magic number, in case you want to know it, it is, hang on one second, S897. S897 is your ticket to saving quite a few $1,000s this year, and tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, who knows, over your lifetime. And it's a shame not to get out there and fight for it, especially because it represents the portal literally to a new world. We're going to say goodbye to the era of exclusive reliance on federal taxation, federal borrowing, and federal spending. We're now into this Olympian atmosphere of federal lending to seize control of the unlimited credit-creating powers of the Federal Reserve System and to mobilize that for the benefit of the American people. That is what is proposed here, certainly in a strictly defined area. But once this goes through, as I'll try to show you, the sky's the limit. You want to break the power of finance capital? Try S897. You want to break the power of Wall Street? Well, the first step is called S897. Now, here's the situation, as people know. The student loan crisis is a true social crisis. It risks bringing many areas of American national life to a tragic halt. We've now got in excess of 1 trillion U.S. dollars, 1,000 billion U.S. dollars in relatively high interest student loans outstanding. And they come in all types. We'll talk about them in a minute. But this has now become the central fact of the existence of an entire generation of people. They are the millennials, so to speak, right? Born between about, say, 1981 and 2001, right? Maybe it starts with Reagan entering the White House, and then the 9/11 attacks closed that entire generational cohort. For the millennials, and also for older people who have needed degrees for professional reasons, vocational reasons, this huge debt burden is the big issue, right? The average graduate now comes out with $25,000 of high-interest student loans. Those are the lucky ones, right? Because that means half or more, half or less. Perfectly common to find people with $40,000 to $50,000 worth of student loans on their back. Once you're talking about an advanced degree, an MA or something like this, you're in the $60,000 to $75,000 range. And of course, if you're talking about an advanced degree, a PhD in physics or medicine or law, you're in the $100,000 plus range. Now we'll play around with the idea of $100,000 of student loans. It's common enough, God knows. Right now, if you were lucky enough to get a Stafford loan, and especially a subsidized Stafford loan, you would be paying $3,400 just in interest every year. That doesn't reduce the principal. That's just debt service, right? Usually, $3,400 a year on $100,000 of interest of principal that you've borrowed, right? You've spent on your education. The trick, however, is that on July 1st, Congress, in its infinite austerity ghoul cruelty, has disposed that that's going to double. It's going to go from 3.4% to 6.8%. So at that point, your interest, if you're that unhappy person groaning under $100,000 of debt, goes to $6,800 a year, a pretty penny. Now, I can't help reminding you, your hero, Ron Paul, the leader of the Paul-Tards, you remember he was big on the campuses last year, that interest rate would already have doubled, except it was voted down by the Congress. They decided to delay it 1 year because obviously Obama and some Democrats wanted to get reelected. But the Paul-Tard, the leprechaun, Ron Paul, voted to double that interest rate already last year. So Ron Paul says, thank you, kids, for helping me run my campaign. I'm going to double your college interest rates, right? If duplicity and treachery have a name, maybe Ron Paul is a good name, but let's leave that aside. The concrete situation is this is going to double. Therefore, along comes Elizabeth Warren with S897. It's called the Bank on Students Act. And it prescribes that the interest rate for student loans, Stafford loans, will go down to the same level as banks get at the Federal Reserve discount window. The Federal Reserve discount window, right now, the discount rate at the Federal Reserve is 0.75%. Now, to avoid confusion, some people have trouble distinguishing the overnight federal funds rate from the discount rate. The discount rate is where you can go and borrow from the Fed if you're a bank. They don't do it that much. Banks don't make really too much use of that window. At least this is historically case, because you can get the overnight money much cheaper. The overnight Fed funds rate is slightly over zero. So you don't want to go pay 0.75% when you can get the same money for just about zero. All you have to do is roll it over every night. But these are different. Okay, so federal funds is interbank lending, practically zero. This is the discount rate. So Elizabeth Warren says, from now on, the students are going to get the same rate, the same preferential rate, because this is below the market, whatever that is, 0.75%. So that is for Stafford loans that are going to be made, according to the bill, between July 1st of this year, 2013, and July 1st of next year, 2014. Now, obviously, that's too short. We don't want a one-year window. We want that permanent. And the only direction this can go in is down, because it's crushing a generation. You've got a lot of young people who have put their lives on hold. They're crushed by student loan principal. They're crushed by the interest. They can't get it down because it's going up, up, up. And that means what? They put their lives on hold. They can't rent a home. They can't buy a home. They can't get married. They can't have children. They can't go for more advanced degrees, which is obviously what you're going to need. You want to compete in the 21st century? You want to compete with Japan, China, Europe? The secondary education is still available there. And if you say, as reactionaries like Bill Bennett, former Secretary of Education, says, is college worth it? The answer, he says, in many cases, no. Go to a good trade school, go to a vocational school. You want to do that, that is an example of the imbecility and incompetence of the U.S. ruling class. You think you can do that. The Chinese will soon be sending anthropologists to study you, and they'll say, their finding will be, there was this advanced civilization, but it destroyed itself. And they all kept saying something about free market or Austrian school or von Hayek, von Mises or something like this. That is national suicide. You've got to have everybody going to college as fast as you can. Obviously, in some cases, the degrees are going to be technical and engineering, and in many cases they will be, right? The majority, one would hope. But you can't get around this college education question. Now, as I've said, the changes that we would make is make it more than 1 year and then make it broader. The Stafford loans are, somewhat less than 10% of the total. So those are subsidized Stafford loans that are going from 6.8 to 3.4, that are actually going the opposite, right? They're going from 3.4 to 6.8. And then there are the unsubsidized Staffords that have already gone to 6.8. But you've got other kinds. You've got Perkins loans. You've got consolidation loans. Consolidation loans are people have refinanced their older, higher interest loans at various times. When the rate goes lower, they can refinance it. They can roll it over into a new loan with a lower interest rate. So that's about $250 billion as far as I can see. Then there are plus loans. The plus loans are the ones that your parents take out for you. That's another category. And then there are private bank loans, right? You go to the Citibank website, you'll see that helpful old Citibank wants to lend you money at 8, 10, 12%, depending on their estimate of your credit worthiness. All of those would have to be rolled in to the 0.75% rate. And the only way to make that happen, the only way to make any of this happen, is get out there and fight, mobilize. And we'll talk about the various ways to do that. But it's obviously not perfect. There is also one slight technicality in the way the bill is done. It says the Federal Reserve is going to come up with the money, not the Congress, not the Treasury, but the Federal Reserve. But it also says it's going to come out of the earnings, the money profits inside the Federal Reserve System. As soon as you do what I'm saying and try to get as much of the trillion as you can refinanced at 0.75%, which is what you want, then you're gonna go beyond the profits of the Federal Reserve System. But that's not a problem. The Federal Reserve System creates money out of air. They have the inherent credit-creating power of the United States of America and this economy, and it is a cornucopia of money. The only thing you have to watch out for is to make sure that the money goes not into financial speculation, financial services, drug money laundering, whatever that is, but goes into things that are productive and or socially necessary, and education, as we're arguing here, obviously qualifies. So get everything as much as possible, as close to 100% of the trillion refinanced at the new lower rate. Make it for longer than a year. Make it open-ended. Make this permanent. Maybe in the future you could get it down even lower. I hope so. We don't want the discount rate going up and then people getting looted through that, right? If Helicopter Ben raises the discount rate, that cannot be allowed to happen. So you want to have simply the Federal Reserve is going to provide the money. But do take a look. You go to tarpley.net. You can find things that I've written about it in almost a week since this has been going. And you can also find the text of the bill. And it's not 2,500 pages. It's 3 pages. So don't be frightened. Take a look at the bill. Now, this is all over the place. This is on The Nation, The Los Angeles Times, Huffington Post, The Daily Kos. I'm happy to say that the economist Joseph Stiglitz has endorsed it. He has a kind of an op-ed piece in the New York Times, I believe in the print edition, but certainly in the internet version of the New York Times. He says Elizabeth Warren's proposal goes in absolutely in the right direction, right? You got to make college more accessible. We don't need more exclusion in this society. We need less. We've already got the worst social mobility in the Western world. Only Britain is worse, excuse me. So we can't have any more of that. One would hope that Stiglitz, maybe as the doyen, the dean of the American economics profession at this point, would launch a petition, right, so that people like Krugman and Robert Reich and Galbraith and others could come out and also join in. But the main burden on this, once again, will fall on the masses, you, the middle class, working people, students, their families, their allies, people who are patriotic and care about the country, and so forth. So strike a blow against usury, cut the power of finance capital, cut the power of the Fed, partially nationalize the Federal Reserve, and give yourself a huge graduation present, right? Several $1,000s in many cases, some people up to $10,000, I'm sure, but do it, and do it now before the academic year ends, as we'll explain in just a minute here on the Webster Tarpley program, Unbound Radio. Welcome back to the Webster Tarpley program here on Unbound Radio. Now, to keep up with everything that I'm telling you, Tarpley.net is the ticket. Webster G. Tarpley Twitter feed. The Twitter feed was very active in this past week since this Warren bill came out. And there's a number of things up on the Tarpley.net that you can look at. Right? You can get the direct links to the text of the bill. couple of articles that I've written, and we want to talk about mobilization. But now, so far, there is a co-sponsor, and that was obviously an important thing. Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat of Oregon, is co-sponsoring. So we got Stiglitz out there supporting it. Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat of Oregon, gets credit, moral and intellectual superiority by endorsing this. This, by the way, is the litmus test. Intelligence, morality, reliability. Who's supporting this bill? You're against this bill. You are deeply scarred morally, politically, and intellectually, every other way. You're in big trouble. And we've had enough of paranoia, pessimism, irrationalism, God knows what. Here is concrete. God helps those who help themselves. And here's how you can help yourself. You can mobilize for this thing to go through. As I said, somebody asked me, when will it come up for a vote? That's easy. Never, unless you make it happen. It is clear that the Democratic leadership in the Senate is hostile. It's going to be clear that the Republicans in the Senate will be even more hostile. And I'm looking especially at these fakers, these charlatans and frauds who say, that they're interested in putting the brakes on the Federal Reserve and trying to limit their lawlessness, right? You'll remember the Paul Tard solution was to audit the Fed. Audit the Fed? What the hell good will that do us? You audit the Fed, you're going to find out it's corrupt. Well, I know that already. I'm not going to fight a whole battle over how many months at God knows what expense to find out what I already know. I want them to pay. I want them to cough up, and this will do it. You go get that bill, they shall provide the money to the Secretary of Education to issue all those loans. And obviously we want this to go further than the current text of the bill, which is, of course, subject to amendment, as you can imagine. So let's look at somebody like Rand Paul or Ted Cruz, these fakers, right? These fraudsters, snake oil salesmen with extremely sinister motives. Let's see what they say. You want to make it easier for the American people to claim their birthright of a college education? It's funny, it goes back to World War II. As a peace dividend for defeating the Nazis, the fascists, and the militarists on the battlefield, the American people got the GI Bill of Rights for 10 or 12 million veterans coming back. And the main points were, you get the right in general. Right? Nobody's going to give it to you, but as a principle, the middle class has a right to own a home. Now the reactionaries, no, you have to rent. And the middle class gets to go to college. The reactionaries say, no, we don't want to pay for that. We don't want to pay for community colleges, state universities. We don't want to pay for the Department of Education. We want college, say the reactionaries, to be only for the richies, as it was back in the 1920s. It was for the elites. They want to go back to that. Again, this shows what a bankrupt ruling class you have, because unless you get everybody going to college, or close to everybody, you are going to be under the Chinese microscope as a poor specimen of what was great. Right? They'll be doing Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the U.S. empire. So look at those guys, and you should sift everybody. How can you be against this? Right? It is the point at which common sense becomes revolutionary. It is so obvious. It is such a no-brainer in today's jargon. How can you be against it? Well, here's what they'll say. Oh, it violates the Austrian school. Because remember, little Ron and little Rand want to abolish the Fed. They say end the Fed. All right, let's follow that. Suppose you end the Fed. If you end the Fed, the interest rate on these loans will go up, and it may go to the market rate. The market rate would be 7, 8, 10, 12%. Then you look at the zombie banks. Will the zombie banks help you? No, they'll help you out at those rates. The zombie banks can't support anything. They use all their resources to keep themselves alive, and they parasitize the government at the same time. So you're going to see who your real friends are. Back in a minute on Welcome Back to the Webster Tarpley program here on Unbound Radio. Keep up with everything going on in the world at Tarpley.net, and the Webster G. Tarpley Twitter feed. Webster G. Tarpley climbing up over 10,000, approaching 11,000 before too long. Now, on the Tarpley.net, you're going to find a recording. I did a program on KDKA, Pittsburgh, CBS affiliate, the oldest AM broadcast station in the United States by most accounts. That was a lot of fun. That's up there. And tomorrow, by Wednesday, the 15th of May, you can also get the program I did with Pacifica, and that will be KPFA on Wednesday, slightly after midday Pacific time. And then you can find it on the archive. That goes on WBAI New York, provided they're still going. They're in danger. Our concern goes out to them and other affiliates of the Pacifica network. And I'm sure there'll be other ones coming after that. Now, let's talk about mobilization. One of the problems with this measure is that it's coming too late in the year. We needed this in September, October. Now, we can't blame Elizabeth Warren. She was only elected in November, took office in January, so this is a relatively rapid advance towards submitting her first bill. But we needed this during the college term. Right now, we've got about 2 weeks at most on most campuses before everybody goes home, in particular, the commencement ceremonies. So let's look at the commencement ceremonies. I'm talking now to the rising seniors, or better yet, to the graduating seniors. The class of 2013, what is your legacy going to be? Are you going to be the chumps and fall guys of the Republicans and the Democrats, of the reactionary Republicans and the Wall Street Democrats, and you're the victims of the Depression, or are you going to organize and do something to change that fate into something much better? I hope you'll take the path of constructive, meaningful action, radical reformism. My methods work, and you can prove that to yourself by doing it. Look at your commencement. What's a commencement usually? It's a highly paid, essentially cynic, usually a cynical, money-grubbing huckster or ideologue, even worse, lunatic Malthusian ideologue, who gets up there and mouths a few platitudes about hitching your wagon to a star or whatever it is, and they get big money for that, right? They get $50,000 to $100,000 for addressing your commencement. Now, the seniors, I suppose, take the lead, although anybody can take the lead. What you want to do is turn your commencement into an organizing event. You want to turn it into a rally for Elizabeth Warren S897, because everybody knows that the number one concern of people who are graduating is that they're crushed by student loans and the interest rates. So why not give yourself a 90% cut in the interest rate from 6.8 and up down to less than 1? You'll be saving 90% on your interest, but you've got to do it, and you got to do it now, because otherwise, on July 1st, 2013, the rate will double for the Stafford loans, and the entire rate structure will jump up for everybody else, because once the federal rate goes to 6.8, then the private rate will go to 10, 15, whatever it is, and you'll be paying through the nose. So do something about that. Find out who the speaker is at your graduation. Contact them and say, oh, we're so happy that you're coming, but we have one thing we want you to do. We want an impassioned, sustained, detailed appeal to help us solve the number one problem we face in life, which is the student loan situation. We want you to include in your speech prominently, and we're not interested in throwaway lines or half-hearted en passant. We want this heavily stressed, underlined. This is the main point, that you're supporting the Elizabeth Warren measure. The president of your institution, college or education, university, they're supposed to care about higher education. If they care, they've got to be for this bill. It's just that easy, right? We can certainly see Elizabeth Warren representing Massachusetts. Pretty clear that higher education is the biggest business, certainly in the Boston area, maybe the entire state, most likely. She's doing something, but this is what government should do. Dirigism. Government has to create the proper conditions in which the private sector, after all, and the public sector can be prosperous. And we want rising standards of living, full employment, longevity, and everything else, cultural and economic progress. So you want your college president to come out and support this. And again, not with some throwaway line, but with a commitment to go and lobby congressmen, senators, to organize other university and college presidents and so forth. The same goes for the Board of Trustees. Gosh, there we have a lot of fat cats. I'm thinking of one institution down here a little bit south of Washington. It's been in the news because of the really predatory activities of a woman on the Board of Trustees who, essentially, a lot of people are there. If it's a public institution, a lot of them are there because they want to wreck it, privatize it, and then feast on the spoils. So you've got to have the speaker, the president, and all the trustees. You're telling them you better support this Elizabeth Warren bill. And of course, if they're reticent, what can you do? One obvious thing to do, especially if you're more militant and intelligent and you have a moral commitment to proper action, you may want to occupy a building, occupy the president's office, right? You get in there and you say, look, we're here and we're staying until the Congress passes this and Obama signs it into law, because we don't trust any of them. We think they all stink. Now, obviously, Occupy sounds like Occupy Wall Street. There's one big difference. This time it's with a program. Occupy Wall Street basically said we have the right to go and, camp in the park, let's say delicately, right? We want to do all these things in the park, but basically we want to camp in the park. So Joe Sixpack looked at that and he said, oh, anarchists, huh? You want to do your thing? Fine, go to hell. You're not doing anything for me. Now it's different. Now you're going to occupy a building or something like this, occupy the president's office, and they'll ask you, what's your demand? And you'll say, the purpose is to lower the interest rate for the average student and the average family and take some of that burden off them. We can save them thousands of dollars a year. We can save them probably an average of $5,000, $4,000. It depends. And at that point, you've got a chance to win some sympathy and to make people understand this principle. You will never get an economic recovery unless you force the Federal Reserve to finance it. The federal budget, the Treasury, is overloaded with the social safety net. Tax income has to be built up with the Wall Street sales tax, as we've explained. But with that, you're going to be paying Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, Head Start, WIC, Pell Grants, food stamps, unemployment benefits. That's more than enough to keep the federal budget going. We do not propose borrowing like there's no tomorrow until the cows come home. But when you get to the Federal Reserve, they have the money. The zombie banks, as we've explained, they're bankrupt. They can't do it. And the Federal Reserve can, because they can create credit. And we want that power. We have to say, Ron Paul, we don't want to destroy the Federal Reserve. We want that credit-creating power to finance the recovery because nobody else can. And if the Fed doesn't provide cheap, low-cost federal student loans, nobody will. So there it is. So we want that. That's our inherent power, and we're not going to alienate that to some private zombie bank. And then you got to think about your alumni, right? In many campuses, the alumni come back, and they have their reunions. Now, those guys are all indebted up to their eyeballs. You want to make sure that you send a delegation to them. Turn, the reunion of the class of 2005 or 2003 coming back for the 10th reunion, they're loaded with debt. Go to their event and say, look, and maybe they're more intelligent because they've been through the school of hard knocks. Get those resolutions. Now, you want to organize your commencement so that you pass a resolution. We will have a resolution up on tarpley.net. We will have a resolution up on the United Front Against Austerity. It's againstausterity.org, UFAA, United Front Against Austerity. We'll have a very short, succinct support statement. You know, we, the graduating seniors and families of the University of so-and-so here for our commencement, our 200th commencement or whatever it is, on such and such a day, we call upon the Congress and the President to enact this bill S-897, the Warren bill. We want our interest rates for all categories, for the entire trillion, lowered to 0.75%. So we'll have a draft text, but it's easy. You just write it up in somewhat, a couple of flourishes, but the main thing is S-897, the Elizabeth Warren bill. So make that happen. Get the alumni involved. Make sure you've told the press why you're doing these things. You will enjoy broad public support. It's not like some anarchist extravaganza, and you can make that happen. Once you've passed the resolution, you've got to get that to the senators and the congressmen, and not just the state where you are, right? Any large educational institution or just about any size has a multi-state student body. So you want it obviously for the ones where it's located, but then everybody going back to wherever they came from takes the resolution with them and submits it to the congressmen and the senators. And here you have to be very blunt. If you don't support this, we will do everything in our power to defeat you, because this is so clear. It is so obvious in the light of day. This has to be done, and it's not going to cost the taxpayer a dime. It's not going to cost. It's not going to increase the deficit. As a matter of fact, it tends to reduce pressure on the federal budget because you're using Federal Reserve funds to do things that you'd otherwise have to use taxpayer money to do. Remember, these are separate. The Federal Reserve is its own accounting unit. It manufactures money out of thin air using the power of the United States economy. That's the basis for what they issue, the future production of the United States, whereas the Treasury has to borrow money or get money through taxation. These are fundamentally different. There will be all kinds of attempts made to obfuscate and to blur that difference. One economist, one guy calling himself an economist said, how can this be done? They'll have to borrow more money at, the existing rates, right? The existing rates are what? It's about 3%, I think, on a 30-year long bond. The other rates, well, we don't need to go through the rates, but you get the idea, right? That you'll have to pay to borrow it and then lend it out. No, that's the whole point. You're telling the Federal Reserve to provide the money. So you're getting your money essentially for free, except for the 75 basis points that the Fed is going to pay for, that you're going to pay for to the Fed. So you get the idea. All of those tired old reactionary arguments don't work. And again, the ones who say that they want to bridle the Federal Reserve, I'm watching them right now because I guarantee you a lot of them are going to essentially betray you. And, of course, Obama. The Obama White House is already putting out fake, they're not really counter proposals, but they're just proposals designed to muddy the waters, right? That maybe we should cap the whole thing at 6.8%, totally inadequate. There's a woman from Southern California who says we should be able to refinance the private loans at 3.4. That's okay, but where does that money come from? It's got to be borrowed. So not good enough. We want the full 9 yards. We want the money from the Federal Reserve System. Seize the Fed. Nationalize them. This is a step in that eminently necessary direction. Deprivatize the Fed. Make Bernanke pay for the recovery. And here we are with our final segment on the Webster Tarpley program this Tuesday, May 14th, 2013. So you're going to have quackademic economists coming out saying this is not sound. They're going to try to make it look like it's a proposal to borrow more money. It's not. It's a proposal to force the Federal Reserve to lend money at lower than market rates. Yes, subsidized federal credit, the essence of dirigism, the essence of Alexander Hamilton, and it simply sweeps aside all of the gibbering charlatans of the Austrian school, the von Mises, von Hayek, the monetarists of the Milton Friedman persuasion, but also the Keynesians, because the Keynesians imagine that the only way you can do this is on budget through borrowing money. No, you don't have to do it that way. And indeed, in today's world of corrupt credit ratings agencies and universal credit default swap attacks, you better not do it that way. You better not let your debt burden get too big. But you've got to meet the needs of the coming generation. So they're going to tell you it's unsound, or they've got this patronizing line, it's not really a serious proposal. It's a frivolous bill. Well, I can think of several tens of millions of families, certainly tens and tens of millions, maybe 100 million students and recent graduates who are crushed by these student loans. They don't think it's frivolous at all. They think it's right to the point. So you'll look at people like U.S. News and World Report and others. I also urge you, do the Take Back the Airwaves, right? Limbaugh, Hannity, O'Reilly, confront them. Ed Schultz, confront him. Get on C-SPAN any morning of the week. It's always about economics. Call in and just spread the word. Let's have a self-organizing, self-starting, self-subsisting, self-feeding organizing process. If you build a movement around this, you can lift the world. Just in one example, we got this foreclosure problem, right? This is for people who are a little bit further on in life. You're going to get foreclosed on, right? Suppose you've got a troubled mortgage and you're threatened with foreclosure. Why not force the Federal Reserve to buy your mortgage and convert it to 0.75%? That would be pretty easy. You want to save some neighborhoods. You want to prevent the value of other homes from being dragged down. You know the whole drill. Force the Fed to buy up those mortgages and let people stay in their homes for 0.75% on the mortgage. There are all kinds of ways the Fed can help. They can rebuild the New York, New Jersey area at 0% or close to it. And above all, they can provide several trillion, 3.6 trillion of lending to rebuild the infrastructure of the United States from a D plus to a C, if we're lucky. Then they're going to come and say, oh, that violates the market. The market is that the bank is more creditworthy than you. Oh, really? All of those banks, every zombie bank in Wall Street, every one of them, J.P. Morgan Chase, Citibank, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, all of them were all bankrupt in September, October 2008. Every one of them has gone bankrupt, masked, if you will, by the TARP and by the $27 trillion of Federal Reserve lending. So if you're a student and you've never been bankrupt, you're more creditworthy than Citibank or Bank of America. A bankrupt zombie bank, because that's what they are, is less creditworthy than you are. So don't let them flim-flam you. Now, we have very little time left. I just wanted to remind you, concerning Syria, the thing that's being hidden from you on Syria is the death squads are losing. Those bearded imbeciles put into the field by NATO, they are losing. That's the big secret. The Washington Post had a front page story a couple of days ago saying the Assad regime is gaining ground. You can look at that. If you get my Twitter feed, you'll find it there. It's again in the Washington Post of today, May 14th, an article saying the regime is gaining ground and the rebels are losing. The rebels have kidnapped Christian priests in the past month. The Yarmulke Brigade of the rebels, they have kidnapped Filipino peacekeepers of the UN on the Golan. They did that in March. They've done it again in the past week. The rebels, according to Carla Ponte of the United Nations, they have used chemical weapons. We've even now got the rebels guilty of cannibalism. A rebel commander practices cannibalism before your eyes. In Turkey, the people are sick of these Nusra rebels. They're terrorists. They're death squads. They bring chaos. They're accusing Nusra of planting that bomb that killed about 50 people. So the mobilization here obviously has to be no U.S. interference, no more war. Tell Kerry, forget it. Yeah, I just noted Kerry is telling Assad the Syrian government has to come to the Geneva conference. He better put out another warning to those death squads because they're not coming. The double standard, the hypocrisy, the lies, Kerry of skull and bones. This is disgusting. Warn Obama, if he attacks Syria and entitlements when the Republicans come for him, he will be all alone. So keep up with the mobilization. Follow it at tarpley.net, Webster G. Tarpley here, and other broadcasting appointments, and we'll see you next week.